So we're going to jump into it. I've got with me here today, I've got Sarah Louise Herring in my team, who's our head of learning and development and all things leadership. And she's also put together all of Red Wolf Academy for us. So some of you are across Red Wolf Academy. And I've also got Alexia in my team here as well. And they'll probably join and participate as we go through today's session. So the first thing I'd love to get from you is to get a little bit of feedback, because if you know us, we love to hear from you all in terms of what your years had in front of you. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a really quick Menti, and this is a multiple choice. So if you haven't used Menti before, all you have to do is open up a browser on your phone, so whether that's Internet Explorer or Chrome, and go to menti.com. menti.com, and it will ask you for a code. And the code is just sitting there nice at the top of the screen. We've got 25454612. And once you get there, and I'll play along, is we can enter in what are some of the things that you faced last year. So there's some comments there about salary demands increasing, whether you got a lot more requests for salary increases over last year. We've got new jobs were created. So did you go through and actually build new roles to meet demands of staff or your business? Working from home stayed in your business. You didn't have everybody come back to work. Then we've got getting creative in recruitment. Some of you might have actually flexed some different muscles in terms of recruitment. And we've got resignations spiked, whether you actually saw an increase in turnover last year. A lot of our clients, I think everybody in Australia, faced a lot more disruption in the talent market. Did you find well-being got worse last year? And last was being a leader harder than ever. All right. We have a lot of people going salary demands, yes, and working from home staying, so that's good. We've got 22 people responding, looking very healthy. Only a few of you said resignations went up, so that's good in terms of that business stability. Good to see. Being a leader was harder, absolutely. I think last year we navigated through a lot of change, and I'm going to share some more in terms of the trends for this year. These were some of our trends that we predicted from last year. So interesting. A few of you are commenting that I could have ticked all of them. And yeah, absolutely. It was a pretty challenging year for a lot of us, whether we were managers of teams or we were leading divisions or we were in a thought leadership position or we were leading whole businesses. Last year certainly got a little bit more challenging. And these were some of our trends from last year, which we saw really build momentum. So what we've done at the end of this year is we did a huge amount of research into what was happening globally in the talent landscape. And then we also looked locally at our Australian landscape. So the session today is going to sort of walk you through all of our findings and start to talk through some of the predictions from what we think might happen this year, some of which obviously may not happen, but we're sort of trying to prepare as many people as possible to start to think about these things. So what we saw was immigration turned back on, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for some of you, if you're employing people from overseas, this is a really positive thing because we absolutely need those skilled migrant workers in our economy. We saw a huge shortfall of talent in the market. So having immigration start to ramp back up is a real positive thing, especially around the 482 visas, our international students. These are all really important. The skill gap is widening, and we've got some really interesting research behind that. Some of you may have heard of the triple squeeze. I'd be interested on the chat if anyone's heard of the triple squeeze. We'll talk about that. We've got the cost of talent is rising, which can be a little bit daunting for some organisations. Lots of internal mobility, or we call it moving seats in the bus, is going to happen. Possibility trumps potential, which we're not going to talk at length about today, but if you're really interested in this space, I know some of you on the call here operate in a lot of that leadership space. You probably want to talk to us a little bit about that research. Next, we've got social intelligence, which is around your ESG policy. Then we've got ways of working has absolutely changed. Yes, we've gone to working from home, but we're seeing lots of creative options put on the table. We're navigating VUCA. Now, as I've been talking to some of my clients, they've gone, what is VUCA? This is never heard of this. So we're going to talk about that as well. And lastly, ChatGPT. You definitely wouldn't have missed that if you have been watching or listening to any type of news. And that's a pretty exciting space as well. So what we're going to do along with today's session is also we're going to pose a question during each, we've got 6 trends that we're going to talk about today. Each trend, we're going to pose a question to you, which will come up on Menti. So if you keep Menti up, we'll be refreshing that and posing you a new question. So you can participate and engage with us through that as well. And we'll probably go to those as well to see some of your responses. So first one, the skill gap widening. So I'm going to hand over to Sarah as I load this up, and she's going to walk you through this one.
Excellent. Thanks, Alicia. Well, we know that there is definitely a skill crisis. I think we've all probably been exposed to that over the last 18 to 24 months. But what we're looking at here in terms of skill shortages is particularly looking at industries where when we typically think of skills shortages, we normally go to those trade or technical labour spaces. But actually what we're seeing now is because of the shut-off in immigration, a lot of the sectors that are impacted are different to the ones that we would normally see. So from our research that we've had a look at, we've noticed that things like aged care, childcare, which we'd probably be aware of over the last couple of years, we've seen that come to the head as well. Engineers, nursing, and office workers as well. There's a huge crisis in terms of skill shortages in these areas, and that's been driven purely because a lot of these roles, particularly in things like hospitality or retail, have been traditionally filled by individuals coming over on working holiday visas or short-term visas. And so while we do have the capacity to fill these roles within Australia, the focus on skilling people in these areas hasn't been as great leading up to the COVID crisis because we weren't expecting that. So what we're seeing come from that is this skill shortage in areas where we would traditionally be quite strong in is now impacting our workforce. And so we're thinking about this differently because what we need to do then is look at, well, how do we look at what skills we have within our organisation? Where are we pulling that talent from, and how can we support in growing and developing those skills as well? Alicia, should we pose the question? So we want to know, do you know what skills you have or what capability looks like in your organisation? So if you jump onto the Mentimeter, it's probably a question that you think about. You may have done a little bit of work around as well if you've done some capability mapping or skill mapping, but we really want just to bring to the forefront of your mind, do you actually know what skills are needed in your organisation now and for the future? And do you have the capability to grow that or the capacity to grow that? And where is that coming from as well? Because as we know, the borders are reopening. However, that insurgence of new people coming into Australia is going to be slow. We have seen it take up a little bit faster in the last couple of months. However, there's still some caution around travel and those skills are still in demand as well. So we might just pass back to Alicia.
So we've got some results coming in, which I will flick over to towards the end. I've got a few people putting in, you say yes, for technical roles we do, but for group service functions, potentially not. So there's lots of interesting comments coming through. Let me quickly go through to the next one.
It's interesting to see some of those skill gaps coming through, and it'd be interesting to hear from different people on the call today. Please feel free to reach out from the different industries, how that's impacted you, because I know we have lots of different industries that we work with, and each industry is going to be impacted differently, whether you're in manufacturing or whether you're in the people industry as well. We've all really been impacted across the board there.
Let's go through the next one, which is navigating an inflated market. and facing the triple squeeze?
So the triple squeeze is, it's not something that we've come up with. It's something that exists in the market. Basically, when we speak about the triple squeeze, we're talking about how do we manage the skill crisis? Well, how we've been managing the skill crisis, and a lot of people could probably agree, is by throwing money at it, and money that we don't have necessarily as well. So what we've seen is an inflation in salary in some areas, or a decrease in salary in other areas, and also particularly roles that have been sourced based off a need, or based off the necessity, I guess, to backfill. And what we've been seeing is organisations meeting the demand of candidates rather than looking at what's realistic and how they can actually position those roles. So what we have is a rise in inflation, which is from an economic point of view, but then we have inflated salaries that are matching that as well. So if any of you have had experience over the last 18 months, we've seen demand in salary rise beyond the standard 3 or 4% that you would normally see, and some people requesting 20 to 40% based on what we're normally seeing. What we also have in that triple squeeze is the inflation, but then the scarcity of talent. So the scarcity of talent is driving up the base salaries that we're looking at, or the demand for that talent. And then the last one that we have there as well is the market that's sitting there. And so we have to be able to move fluidly with that, but make the best decisions. And so what we're seeing is organisations reinventing the way that they pitch to candidates, that they pitch to talent, looking at how we can actually sustain that, and look at how we navigate those inflated markets so that we're not actually overselling on our headcount cost, but what we're doing is bringing in the right talent for the right price, and we're making sure that we can grow and harness their development as well as they shift and change. So one of the questions that we have here, and if you work in the HR space or the people space, I'd be interested to hear, you can pop in the chat panel, but when was the last time you did salary benchmarking? And it's a really important exercise, and I don't think it's done often enough. And when we talk about salary benchmarking, we're talking about going out to any of the firms that you might use. So maybe you work with some of the big firms like Aon or Mercer, McKinsey, maybe you work with PwC, and looking at what are the benchmarks for the roles that I have in my organisation, what are other organisations of the same size, the same demographic paying for these roles, and then what am I paying for these roles, and then looking at how we navigate and manage that. So you might find from doing this exercise, if you have done it or haven't done it, that you might see that you're overstepping the mark there, or you might be quite understepping the mark. So it's just an interesting exercise. And I'm glad to see some people in the chat here have been doing it. So Nicole, last November you did it. That's fantastic. Bachi, you've done it. You've never done benchmarking. So that's interesting. It's interesting to see where you might be sitting in terms of competition from a salary point of view as well. And yeah, being an NFP is challenging. Definitely competing for the best talent to retain the talent there. And I can imagine that there'd be some restrictions around that as well. So really understanding the market is going to put you in a strong position to actually look at how do we manage that triple squeeze and keep our salaries under control as well. So Alicia, over to you.
All right, the next one we're going to talk about is moving seats. And this is a really interesting one because I think we've had to get quite creative with our organisation and its talent and the capability. I've been doing a little bit of work for one client in particular, and we're seeing this demand for new roles to be created and people wanting to be promoted and almost like creating all this career framework, even for smaller size businesses, because people want to get that experience and that development, and it's a great retention strategy, but it makes it a little bit complicated for those of you who are actually trying to drive it and navigate through it, whether you're a manager or a leader. It's hard to keep up with those demands. So we're definitely going to see this increase for those people who've had to go externally to source talent, or even just managing the talent within. We've got to keep up with their development requests and what they're looking for in terms of their workforce and what they're looking for. We know based on the research, and you'll see there we've referenced Korn Ferry, that that companies are going to face greater retention with those employees that have that focus on professional development. So the question here for you is, how are you growing that internal talent? Because that's a really challenging one. It's often quite a complex solution that needs to happen beyond just a simple development plan for an individual. What are you doing across the business, across your team? Do you have particular programs in place? Are you doing shadowing and mentoring? People doing job share? What are you doing across your organisation to make sure that people are growing within their roles? So we've got a question up there on Menti for those of you who want to refresh. We're keen to get your feedback on what you are doing, because it certainly is a time where we're having to flex that creativity to meet demands of the staff within our workforce. Sarah, was there anything else on this internal mobility that you saw in the research?
Yeah, interestingly enough, a lot of organisations, particularly the bigger ones, have traditionally gone after what we call the pedigree candidates, and that's looking at the high performing people with the highest GPA from university, people who have the highest amount of university degrees, who have been able to outperform their peers. And what we're seeing is a lot of organisations are now starting to slowly move away from that and look at how we grow people rather than bring people into the business that are already at a certain point. And I think this is a really smart strategic move, particularly if you want to play the long game. Generally speaking, the high performing people that you're bringing in on the short term, you might actually see them churn faster. And so there's been a bit of research coming through around looking at the possibility of someone's growth over their initial hit the ground running kind of position as well, which I thought was really interesting. So going more back to the nurture and grow rather than hit the ground running space.
We've got some interesting comments on Menti, so I thought I'd share them just in terms of some ideas. Always find these sessions are really good when we get people sort of sharing what they're doing. It might spark some ideas for you. So we've got someone saying one-on-one coaching, sharing ideas, some internal training. We're definitely seeing that sort of lunch and learn concept we had probably 10 years ago. I can see Anna P on the call. I remember back in the day when we were at SAS, we did lots of lunch and learns, and that was a really great way to share knowledge, especially if you're in a technical-based business, to share that knowledge internally. And we've got here cross-training with departments. Again, someone else has said that. So definitely sharing that knowledge within an organisation is really important. What about the external knowledge? You know, if that knowledge doesn't exist, there was some research we looked at last year that was saying that 78% of businesses are going to face a skill shortage in the next 2 years. So potentially they don't have the knowledge within the organisation to fulfil that need, whether it's because of the demand of how fast something is evolving, especially in the technology space. So sometimes we have to go even beyond that internal cross-training as well. So we have to think quite creatively about how we bring that knowledge and expertise into the business. But some really good commentary from everybody, which is nice to see. It's always nice to share our ideas on these calls and learn from each other. So the next one is around social intelligence. And for some people, you're going, what is this? As we see the next generation come into the workforce, we're certainly seeing them have much higher expectations on their employer in terms of what they're doing around sustainability, around diversity, inclusion, around wellbeing, around this whole space of a positive impact. Some organisations, typically the larger ones, have some pressure to do this, but we're seeing that transcend into all organisations. So the question we've posed here is, well, what are you doing to progress ESG going into this year and beyond? Whether that's, we're going to actually proactively have some workshops around improving it. We're going to put some programs in place. We're going to report on it, because that's often something that companies want to do as well, because if we report and measure, we can put things in place to improve. Sarah, anything else on the ESG area?
I think it's going to be a really big focus for now and beyond. Everyone's probably seen the big movements inside of wellbeing and DEI, and particularly around sustainability. And so I think it's taking it to the next level beyond having a food day once a year. It's about looking at, well, what does it mean to really embrace these three aspects, and how do we position that not only for our employees but for our external and internal clients? What does that look like for us as a brand, and really linking that into things like your employee value proposition, and how you choose to show up as an organisation as well, and what that looks like too.
Yeah, and I've had some comments. Somebody put on Menti that, the business does lots of talking but not a lot of action, and that's definitely something that we also see as well, is them talking about it, but it's really, I guess, staff are often looking, well, what is the business actively doing? What's that proactive action that's really happening? And I think the expectation's really lifting, and people want to be involved. People want to support those initiatives within an organisation. And it's something that ultimately is a great opportunity to be talking to both your customers, but also your staff about, and finding out what the needs are, what the interests are, and how these policies or these programs can really improve the overall positive impact that the organisation might have, both back into the community, whether it's the environment or the people within it. But knowing that an organisation exists in this ecosystem. So we're definitely going to see that. We see that progressing a lot this year, particularly around that wellbeing space as well. We're going to see that expand beyond just, we're having, a mental health day or a EAP. It's really beyond those, what are now really those basic needs that staff have, and really look at, well, how do we view wellbeing within our organisation? So bringing just a level of sophistication to it.
Yeah, and I think that's about going back to the foundations of what these three aspects actually mean, where I think a lot of organisations have made some progress in terms of trying to put some initiatives in place. However, they've missed that critical step of going to the foundation of what does it actually mean in terms of sustainability? What does it mean in terms of wellbeing? And what does it mean in terms of DE&I for us? So looking at the very core basics in terms of things like psychological safety, and building cultures of trust, and building cultures of inclusion and strong communication, they're actually the foundations for most of these. And if you don't have those, and all the initiatives are quite lovely to sit on top, but they're not sticky. And so I think we're going to see that a little bit of regression going back to what does a foundation look like, and how do we get that right, and then go back to those initiatives on top.
Excellent. So hopefully that all got you thinking. So the next one is ways of working. So obviously all of us, going hybrid, working from home, that is certainly, I guess, the new norm. We know that people in some organisations did move back into the office, and we see that sort of blended way of working. But ultimately, flexibility is top of mind for people, and they're finding job opportunities that have that flexibility. But they're also probably looking for things like autonomy, and being allowed to be quite independent and self-sufficient in their roles as well. We're seeing some other words start to populate as we start to, look at these studies and what the research would tell us. So I'd love to know, we've got some insights into things like the 4-day work week and a few other things, but before we do that, I'll ask you on Menti, for those who are following along, how do you know how your workforce want to work? I'd love to know what some of you have done as a business. Is it the business has made a decision to go hybrid and we pick the days of working, or we've gone out and surveyed staff, we've looked at our customers? Like, how do you know? How do you know what is necessary within your business? I'd love to know what people have done in the last 12 months, whether that's we've actually gone and surveyed staff, whether we've run focus groups, or whether, we talked to a handful of people and we made the executive decision that this is what was needed. So I'd love to know what your approaches have been, and what feedback you got. So feel free to put that in the chat while I talk you through the next, some of the research and some of the things we might see turn up. So Sarah, do you want to walk through these ones for us?
Absolutely. So some of the big trends that we've seen, and you've probably heavily heard around the 4-day work week. It's not something new. It's something that was being discussed before COVID hit, actually. There's a couple of books that have been written about it as well. But what we did see at the end of last year was a few of the larger organisations moving towards a 4-day work week, like Unilever, for example. There was quite a lot of publicity around that. But we're seeing this work in lots of different organisations. I know that we have some of our clients that operate on a 4-day work week, but we're seeing it across lots of different industries. So within law, within IT, and within not-for-profit as well. And the benefit here is that what they're doing is condensed hours. So they're working full-time, condensed hours into a 4-day work week and getting paid full-time. But the productivity is the same, if not even more, because people have less time to waste and more time to be productive. So that's one approach that's been taken. A lot of government agencies have introduced the 9-day fortnight, as well as hybrid remote working. So we know that example like TAFE New South Wales and some other government agencies are working a 9-day fortnight and working from any location within New South Wales, or where there's a like a pop-up office available. A lot of organisations are also introducing the work from anywhere policy. So this is an extension of, I guess, their remote work policy, in that some people have not been able to travel for a while, and also to encourage international travel to come back in and out of Australia. We're seeing people take up to 6 to 8 weeks of working from anywhere in the world. So this means that they're not on holidays, they are working, but they're working from wherever they are located. So for example, you might have family in Greece and you might decide to go to Greece for a holiday. And then if your organisation adopts this principle, you might actually stay there for up to 12 weeks, working for up to 8 of those weeks while you're in Greece as well. So still being very productive, but being able to have that work-life balance. And then the last one, again, it's not new, but it is something that is giving people a lot of flexibility, which is a non-linear work day. So again, not expecting people to be in the seats from 9 till 5. Still doing the output that they require, but maybe they're working a couple of hours in the morning, having a break, a couple of hours in the afternoon, and maybe some hours in the evening as well, so that they can fit in any life admin, I guess, as we like to call it, throughout their day as well. And this has been quite successful in a lot of organisations also. So again, we're not saying that these are the solutions, that they're right or wrong. It's just some of the research and some of the interventions that are being successful in some organisations, and it's worth just to take a note and have a look, particularly if you're questioning, challenged with, or reviewing your hybrid or work from home policy as well. Alicia, over to you.
Excellent. So the last one on our list is VUCA. And some of you may have not heard this term. I know as I've been talking through this deck in some detail with our clients, they've gone, what is that, Alicia? I didn't know what it was until Sarah tabled it with us probably about 12 months ago. But it's a really interesting term, and it's something that I think people, when they see it, they go, oh, yes, that makes sense. That's definitely what we've been navigating through, and it's nice that they've put some language around it, and then they've given us some frameworks around how to navigate through it. So I do have our next question up on Menti as well, and you can feel free to answer the next question while Sarah walks you through this one, all about VUCA and navigating change.
Excellent. So change is probably one of the biggest things that we hear from clients around. It's hard to manage. Everyone's different. We know that everyone's different. That's what makes us human beings. VUCA is not new. It came out in the 1980s. It actually came out of the military. Like most leadership frameworks, they tend to come out of the military. But what it does is it gives you a really good position to go, well, how do I approach change, or how do I approach strategy? And what does that look like from my point of view versus the point of view of others? So the premise around VUCA is that we operate in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguity. So it's very much around, we can take the last 24 plus months as being very, very VUCA. So it was quite volatile. We didn't know what was happening from one month to the next with the lockdowns. There was a lot of uncertainty around what we can do, what we can't do, what we can access, what we can't access. There was a lot of complexity to it. There was lots of different stories we were being told, lots of different directions that we were being pulled in, and it was quite ambiguous in the sense that we didn't actually have autonomy over what was happening. We didn't know what those next steps were. What we do when we have VUCA is we create a lot of change anxiety. And if anyone's like me, I don't like change. I'll happily admit it. And it does drive those anxieties up. So when you put that in a larger scale in terms of an organisation or a team, what you get is a lot of disengagement because people start to protect themselves and they use different coping strategies to actually help to mitigate the change the way that they want to move through it. So what we say is we want to flip VUCA. So we're always going to operate in a VUCA world, regardless if we have COVID or not. You might have something pop up tomorrow that's going to create change or disturbance in your pattern. You might have an issue with supply chain. There's lots of different things that can cause VUCA to present itself. When we flip VUCA, what we're doing is we're leading by example, and we're leading with vision first. We're leading with then understanding. We're creating certainty around what we can create certainty around, and we're giving people autonomy, and that's autonomy to make decisions and be in control of their space. So when we do these things, what we do is we create higher engagement, we create higher levels of trust, and what that forms is higher levels of psychological safety, so that when things do get a little bit pear-shaped, when we do have to adjust and move really quickly, that psychological safety is going to help us to sustain our momentum forward, and it's going to create that propulsion to move forward as well. So really understanding VUCA is really understanding what does our security look like in terms of how are we operating, what are we setting, what does that sustainability look like in terms of our practices, how clearly am I communicating to our people. So clarity is all about, am I giving them the right information? Am I giving people enough information? Am I making sure that information is actually landing with those people and that their perspective is being absorbed in the way that I need it to be taken? And then the certainty is, let's not make up things that we don't know. Let's provide the information that we do know, and let's provide small steps to get there as well. So if there's something that's quite big and lofty and it's something that we want to achieve, but we're not too sure how to get there, chunk it down, create that vision, link into that understanding, link into the certainty, and drive that autonomy, and that will drive up your engagement and help with that change management, because each person can then process it in a way that they need to process it. So the question, have we gone to the question there while we were going through that, Alicia?
Sure has. It's come up on Menti, and we've got a few people who've responded. I've only got a couple of people versus the typical 10 people, so I don't know whether I'm not sure how the business deals with change. So you can see there people are saying we assemble a team to review the impact and decide on the best approach to deal with it. And then change is inevitable. Yes, it is, and can happen unexpectedly. And at different levels, managers need to cope with their teams, which is absolutely a really big challenge for a lot of managers, because we know that typically, experts in their job get promoted into looking after a team of other people. But unfortunately, we don't typically give them the skills to manage business, to manage change, to manage emotions, to influence, and all these different skills that you need once you become a manager of people. We kind of just expect them to have those skills in their toolkit. So there's already some good comments coming through there. Or someone's mentioned ADKAR as a methodology, and that's something we certainly talk extensively about, isn't it, Sarah, whenever we do all things training?
Yeah, so ADKAR is a change approach that helps you to move through change, whereas VUCA is more a bigger strategic kind of overview and can help remove the coping and move into more action and strategy. So yes, ADKAR is a great change methodology as well. So here are some of the areas that we we see organisations needing to be prepared for. So we know it's already here. Automation, the rise of automation is it's here, and it's going to get bigger, and it's going to improve our lives, but it's also going to help increase productivity and efficiencies. But it's going to change the way that we do things. So being prepared for that, using VUCA, understanding how to flip VUCA in terms of automation, it will help in terms of making it more of a positive experience rather than negative. And this is then linked into digitalization as well, and how we manage those remote workforces. So again, things like basic things like printing is going to become obsolete. So we've already seen it with the decrease in newspaper printing. So it's just going to continue to evolve as well. The other things that we need to look at is the dilemma between offshore and right fit. So particularly with the triple squeeze that we're seeing at the moment, a lot of organisations are panicking and going, how do we save costs? So we're looking at offshoring or reducing the costs there, which is fine. But then there's that dilemma of, well, which one fits over which aspect? So do we want to grow talent from within, or do we want to offshore? And that then goes into that automation. So what do we automate versus what do we actually keep as a manual process? And then the last one, which will be the last point that we talk to as well, is moving towards an AI future. Now, we're already here. If anyone's done any online shopping through some of the big grocery brands, AI is infiltrated through everything that you do online. If you have social media, AI and the algorithms are connected to all of your social media accounts, pushing you targeted advertisement. So AI is already here. It's about how do we use it in a smart way to actually benefit the people and benefit the organisation as well. Again, something to think about when we're looking at VUCA and how do we flip VUCA to make it more digestible for our workforce as well. So I might hand over to Alicia to talk about Chat GPT, because I know that that's a passionate topic for you.
I even did a live Chat GPT with a client of mine the other day, and they were like, what is happening? It's like rise of the robots. So for those of you who haven't delved into Chat GPT yet, you can go to OpenChat online, and it's totally free, and you can basically pose questions to Chat GPT and it will give you answers, ideas. It is incredibly smart in terms of what it can produce. For example, we asked it to write or give us some ideas on a topic, and then we were like, great, give us 10 ideas on this topic. Then you can say, great, on the point you mentioned in point number 2, give me 5 pieces of research that would back up that idea. Of that research, can you write me a short article including that? So you can just prompt it to do things for you and to write for you. And that's just one very small aspect of it. We're seeing this being used very, very quickly since its release. And I mean, if you do any type of searches, there's lots of predictions about what's going to happen just with this one use of AI. In the technology space, we're seeing it being able to write code and actually get in and take in those roles of developers. And so therefore seeing roles will shift. And so instead of you writing, hundreds of lines of code, we need people who are more architects of that code who can read it and understand it and know what they need it to do differently. So the roles that we see in the future are going to be redesigned yet again. And we're going to see the skill set of the people that we need shift yet again. So this is it's a really exciting time where we're seeing the impact in the academic world. They're seeing universities being quite impacted by it. I believe it just passed the medical process over in the US. And so they're now saying, well, we can't change the degree and the learning, but we need to change the way that we assess it. So it's creating a lot of conversation and a lot of change in the market globally. But we're also seeing businesses who are jumping on the front foot and using it to write scripts for sales calls, to embed it into their actual platforms that they're using. I saw a client of ours who have a platform, and now instead of having a normal chatbot, they've used ChatGPT inside the chatbot. So it's actually very, very smarter than a normal chatbot would be. So seeing it being used lots of different ways. So we sort of posed the question to you around, well, what are you doing in this space with your business? Are you leveraging technology? Are you getting your staff to look at the technology platforms they could be using? Because there's certainly going to be a lot of change for those companies who are looking to accelerate the role design and through using technology. We could probably do a whole webinar just on that topic alone, because it's certainly going to be a pretty interesting topic this year. So that brings us sort of towards the end of our trends. But I guess I would love to find out from the group. I've got one last question for you. So I'll bring up Menti again. I'd love to know, with all this change that's happening, we're seeing lots of different things being impacted in the market. What are some of the skills that you guys are thinking that your managers and leaders are needing in the future? Ignore the W at the end of my question there. So I'd love to know what you're thinking. What are some of the skills? And you might even think, what are some of the skills of the people that people, in their individual contributor roles, what are some of the skills they need? What are those skills that you think are going to be valuable, that they're really important? Maybe skills that are a little bit lacking within the organisation itself. Yeah, would love to get your feedback around, what are you thinking? We talked a little bit earlier about the skill gap widening. What are some of those skill gaps for you in your business? Could be technical, could be what we call essential skills, or what used to be called soft skills. We now call essential skills, because as you can see, they're becoming more and more important. Some really good comments here around communication. I'd love to know for those people, I love it when people say communication. I go, great, tell me more. Is it that verbal? Is it that written? Is it the relationship? Is it having the right conversations? Because communication is such a big topic in itself, and it's often something that people say we need to improve communication, but there's a lot in that one topic that we could unpack. We've got embracing tech. Absolutely, given what we just said. Computer literacy, financial literacy, that's a really interesting one. We've been doing work with one particular business, and we're taking them through a little bit of that at the moment. And it's interesting to see that the importance of understanding business in your role, especially as a manager. Lots of all of the above, coaching skills, resilience has come up again. Willingness to transform as managers and org. So there's certainly a lot of, these are what we call essential skills that are starting to pop up that are going to be highly valuable. And it's one of the conversations I have a lot at the moment is, what are the skills that you need to develop that will make you more valuable in the next 10 years, right? And there's a real future that we're operating in. It's not the future is coming. We're certainly here. What are those skills that you can take with you for the rest of your career that will be valuable, that are irreplaceable, regardless of technology, regardless of industry? What are those skills that you need? So some good answers there. Keep them coming as I go through some last points with you. So it sort of brings us to the conversation around, well, what are we going to do in this space? So how can we confidently navigate through these challenges? Because there's a lot here. There's a lot that we need to overcome. And we believe that a big step forward is through really confident and capable and empowered managers and leadership in your business. And that's not easy to get. It's not easy to achieve. And it's going to be a constant ongoing journey for many organisations, and it's one that never really ends. But we believe that if you've got management and leadership who understand what's coming and that they have the right skills to help them feel equipped to navigate through this, that the business will be in a much better perspective to be able to execute on the change. We also know that these management skills are top of mind for a lot of organisations, whether we're looking at feedback from staff around what they're looking for from their managers themselves, but also the newer workforce with our Gen Zs becoming highly demanding around the skills they're looking for within their leaders and managers across a business. So we've got two key frameworks that we operate in, especially when we're talking about management and leadership, and you'll see I've sort of going from one to the other. And we've built an architecture that really clearly defines the difference between those, but knowing that there's a very clear overlap, that there is an absolute overlap. But if we think about management, we've got these 3 core components around capability, credibility, and competency. And then with leadership, we talk about empathy, engagement, and empowering. And the other day I was talking to someone who we put into a team leader role, and I went through this framework, and they said to me, they go, I actually feel like I've got a lot of the leadership skills, but now I'm responsible for people. I actually don't feel like I feel very confident in this management space. And it's why we often start with this management piece for a lot of organizations, because it's often the missing piece. You know, in the industry, we spend a lot of time talking about leadership skills, but often these core fundamental management skills are lacking for those people who are responsible for other people. So you can see here in the framework, we've got capability, and this is around your business acumen and really understanding strategic thinking and critical thinking and navigating change like we were talking through. If we've got the right skills to understand that, that will make us feel more confident in our roles. As we go through credibility, we need managers who are credible, who do know how to navigate conversations, that they know how to give feedback and have conversations to coach and mentor their people. We need to go through their values and how they're going to drive engagement in their teams, which someone mentioned earlier about that, driving that performance in your team. We absolutely need to make people feel equipped to do that. And lastly is competency. And again, in this conversation around the trends, we talked a lot about skills. What are the skills that are missing? What's the gap? Where's the future? It's really important that this conversation doesn't stop and start with the HR department, so to speak, because what we know is that this is an organizational problem that many businesses will face, and it needs to be addressed through capable managers who can look at the skills and competency of their own team, map that out and look at where the skills need to be. What are the gaps? How do I plug that with their development planning? We want managers to own and drive that as much as possible. Hence why we have this competency component in the program around management. And then we have our Lead with Confidence program and architecture, and you can see this big component around empathy and fundamentally the complexity of emotional intelligence, because there is so much that goes into that beyond just empathy, but ultimately that mindset of an individual. Then we've got engagement, and how do we drive engagement? How do we build that high-performing team? How do we get motivation out of people? How do we ensure well-being within our staff? Again, something we've just talked about in terms of well-being being front of mind. And lastly, that empowerment. I often talk to people about how do you lead without authority, and this is through empowering people and leading others, leading the organisation, and you've got those frameworks in there as well. So you can start to see the difference between that management and leadership, but also where it starts to cross over. So we run 2 of these, we run 1 of each program each year, and we take very small cohorts of only 6 people through the cohort. We're halfway through a Manage with Confidence with a group here in Sydney, and the feedback from them has been phenomenal in terms of that peer-to-peer learning. We've got people in that group who are operations managers wanting to be COOs. We've got a variety of different industry and people in that program, but it's really set up for those people who potentially have been promoted into management without that right training and support to feel confident. And so it's 12 days over 12 months. It's quite an extensive program with project work, and it's heavily face-to-face with some online components and lots of coaching in between. So you can see we've got 2 cohorts coming up later this year for anybody who's in Sydney. We actually do have someone in Adelaide, and they fly in every month for it. So that's also an option. And then we have a Lead with Confidence cohort starting towards the end of the year. And that's a great program for those upcoming future leaders who maybe are in management, but maybe who aren't, who really need that investment and growth in your business. And the other option for businesses is to run a private cohort within your business. And that's where we come in and we tailor the program that we have, and we totally bespoke it inside your organisation. And we customise it. We use your frameworks, your strategies, your P&L, your processes, and then we reinforce it with all of the training. And it means a whole cohort of people can go through it together within your organisation, and they do project work together. So that's also an option for many businesses as well. So we would definitely encourage you, if you're really interested in how you're going to develop your talent this year, we'd love to talk to you about that. So there's an option there. If you scan the QR code to book a really quick 15-minute meeting with me if you like, and we could just talk through where you're at and what you're thinking and what the gaps are. We can talk through if we've got any options available for you. Also, after this meeting, what we'll do to everyone who's on the call is we will send you through the report. So we've obviously walked you through that research in a nice summary, but we've got that comprehensive report which has all the links and references to all the points of research. Sarah, I think there was like 30 points of reference for those of you who are that interested in how we do the research. But we certainly have done quite comprehensive research to put together that report. So thank you, everybody. That's a wrap for us. I hope you got a lot of value out of today. It was great to see everyone's involvement on Mentimeter and get all your input. That's really helpful. Hopefully you've also learnt something from each other in terms of maybe got a new idea or a takeaway. But yes, thank you, everybody. And we hope to talk to you all really soon. So thank you.